30th of June, 1960, and it entered service with United Airlines on the 5th of July, 1960. As a derivative, the 720 had low development costs, allowing profitability despite few sales. Compared to the 707-120, it has a length reduced by 9 feet, 2.7 m, a modified wing and a lightened airframe for a lower maximum takeoff weight. Powered by 4 Pratt & Whitney JT3C turbojets, the initial 720 could cover a 2,800 mi, 5,200 kilometers, 3,200 mi, range with 131 passengers in 2 classes. Powered by JT3D turbofans, the 720B first flew on the 6th of October, 1960, and entered service in March, 1961. It could seat 156 passengers in one class over a 3,200 mi, 5,900 kilometers, 3,700 mi, range. A total of 154 Boeing 720S and 720BS were built until 1967. Some 720S were later converted to the 720B specification. The 720 was succeeded by the Boeing 727 Tri-J. 707-120, edit. The 707-120 was the first production 707 variant, with a longer, wider fuselage, and greater wingspan than the Dash 80. The cabin had a full set of rectangular windows and could seat up to 189 passengers. It was designed for transcontinental routes, and often required a refueling stop when flying across the North Atlantic. It had 4 Pratt & Whitney JT3C6 turbojets, civilian versions of the military J57, initially producing 13,000 lbf, 57.8 kN, with water injection. Maximum takeoff weight was 247,000 pounds, 112,000 kilograms, and first flight was on the 20th of December, 1957. Major orders were the launch order for 2,707-121 aircraft by Pan Am and an American Airlines order for 3,707-123 aircraft. The first revenue flight was on the 26th of October, 1958. 56 were built, plus 7 short-bodied -138s. The last -120 was delivered to Western in May 1960. The 707-138 was a -120 with a fuselage 10 feet, 3.0 m, shorter than the others, with 5 feet, 1.5 m, 3 frames, removed ahead and behind the wing, giving increased range. Maximum takeoff weight was the same 247,000 pounds, 112,000 kilograms, as the standard version. It was a variant for Qantas, thus had its customer number 38. To allow for full load takeoffs at the mid-flight refueling stop in Fiji, the wing's leading edge slats were modified for increased lift, and the allowable temperature range for use of full takeoff power was increased by 10 degrees Fahrenheit, 5.5 degrees Celsius. 7-138s were delivered to Qantas between June and September 1959, and they first carried passengers in July of that year. The 707-120B had Pratt & Whitney JT3D1 turbofan engines, which were quieter, more powerful, and more fuel efficient, rated at 17,000 lbf, 75.6 kN, with the later JT3D3 version giving 18,000 lbf, 80 kN. This thrust did not require water injection, eliminating both the system and 5,000–6,000 pounds of water. The -120B had the wing modifications introduced on the 720 and a longer tailplane. A total of 72 were built, 31 for American and 41 for TWA, plus 6 short-bodied -138Bs for Qantas. American had its 23 surviving -123s converted to -123Bs, but TWA did not convert its 15-131s. The only other conversions were Pan Am's 5 surviving -121s and 1 surviving -139. The 3 aircraft delivered to the USAF as -153s and the 7 short-bodied Qantas -138s, making 13 total 707s delivered to Qantas between 1959 and 1964. The first flight of the -120B was on the 22nd of June, 1960, and American carried the first passengers in March, 1961. The last delivery was to American in April, 1969. Maximum weight was 258,000 pounds, 117,000 kilograms, for both the long and short-bodied versions. 707-220, edit. The 707-220 was designed for hot and high operations with more powerful 15,800 lbf, 70.3 kN, Pratt & Whitney JT4-3 turbojets. 5 of these were produced, but only 4 were ultimately delivered, with 1 being lost during a test flight. All were for Braniff International Airways and carried the model number 707-227. The first entered service in December 1959. This version was made obsolete by the arrival of the turbofan-powered 707-120B. 707-320, edit. The 707-320 Intercontinental is a stretched version of the turbojet-powered 707-120, initially powered by JT4-3 or JT4-5 turbojets producing 15,800 lbf, 70.3 kN, each. Most eventually got 17,500 lbf, 77.8 kN. JT411s. The interior allowed up to 189 passengers, the same as the -120 and -220 series, but improved two-class capacity due to an 80-in fuselage stretch ahead of the wing, from 138 feet 10 in, 42.32 m, to 145 feet 6 in, 44.35 m. with extensions to the fin and horizontal stabilizer extending the aircraft's length further. The longer wing carried more fuel, increasing range by 1,600 miles, 2,600 kilometers, and allowing the aircraft to operate as true transoceanic aircraft. The wing modifications included outboard and inboard inserts, as well as a kink in the trailing edge to add area inboard. Takeoff weight was increased to 302,000 pounds, 137,000 kilograms, initially, and to 312,000 pounds, 142,000 kilograms, with the high-rated JT4s and center section tanks. Its first flight was on the 11th of January, 1958. 69 turbojet 707-320s were delivered through January 1963, the first passengers being carried by Pan Am in August 1959. 707-420, edit. The 707-420 was identical to the -320, but fitted with Rolls-Royce Conway 508, Arco.12, turbofans, or bypass turbojets as Rolls-Royce called them, of 18,000 lbf, 80 kN, thrust each. The first announced customer was Lufthansa. Borg's controversial order was announced 6 months later, but the British carrier got the first service-ready aircraft off the production line. The British Air Registration Board refused to give the aircraft a certificate of airworthiness, citing insufficient yaw control, excessive rudder forces, and the ability to over-rotate on takeoff, stalling the wing on the ground, a fault of the de Havilland Comet 1. Boeing responded by adding 40 in 100 centimeters to the vertical stabilizer, applying full instead of partial rudder boost, and fitting an underfin to prevent over-rotation. These modifications except to the fin under the tail became standard on all 707 variants and were retrofitted to all earlier 707s. The 37-420s were delivered to Boeing, Lufthansa, Air India, LL, and Varig through November 1963. Lufthansa was the first to carry passengers in March 1960. 707-320B, edit. The 707-320B had the application of the JT3D turbofan to the Intercontinental, but with aerodynamic refinements. The wing was modified from the -320 by adding a second inboard kink, a dog-toothed leading edge, and curved low-drag wingtips instead of the earlier blunt ones. These wingtips increased overall wingspan by 3.0 feet, 0.9 m. Takeoff gross weight was increased to 328,000 pounds, 149,000 kilograms. The 175 707-320B aircraft were all new build. No original -320 models were converted to fan engines in civilian use. First service was June 1962, with Pan Am. The 707-320B Advanced is an improved version of the -320B, adding the 3-section leading edge flaps already seen on the -320C. These reduced takeoff and landing speeds and altered the lift distribution of the wing, allowing the ventral fin found on earlier 707s to be removed. From 1965, -320BS had the uprated -320C undercarriage allowing the same 335,000 pound, 152,000 kilograms, tow. These were often identified as 707-320BAH. 707-320C, edit. The 707-320C has a convertible passenger freight configuration, which became the most widely produced variant of the 707. The 707-320C added a strengthened floor and a new cargo door to the -320B model. The wing was fitted with 3-section leading edge flaps which allowed the removal of the underfin. A total of 335 of this variant were built, including some with JT3D7 engines, 19,000 lbf, 85 kN, takeoff thrust, and a takeoff weight of 335,000 pound, 152,000 kilograms. Most -320CS were delivered as passenger aircraft with airlines hoping the cargo door would increase second-hand values. The addition of 2 additional emergency exits, one on either side aft of the wing, raised the maximum passenger limit to 219. Only a few aircraft were delivered as pure freighters. One of the final orders was by the Iranian government for 14 707-3J9C aircraft capable of VIP transportation, communication, and in-flight refueling tasks. 707-700, edit. The 707-700 was a test aircraft used to study the feasibility of using CFM International CFM56 engines on a 707 airframe and possibly retrofitting existing aircraft with the engine. After testing in 1979, N707QT, the last commercial 707 airframe, was restored to 707-320C configuration and delivered to the Moroccan Air Force as a tanker aircraft via a civilian order. Boeing abandoned the retrofit program, since they felt it would be a threat to the 757 and 767 programs. The information gathered from testing led to the eventual retrofitting of CFM56 engines to the USAF C-135/KC-135R models, and some military versions of the 707 also used the CFM56. The Douglas DC-8 Super 70 series with CFM56 engines was developed and extended the DC-8's life in a stricter noise regulatory environment. As a result, significantly more DC-8s remained in service into the 21st century than 707s. Undeveloped variants, edit. The 707-620 was a proposed domestic range-stretched variant of the 707-320B. The 707-620 was to carry around 200 passengers while retaining several aspects of the 707-320B. It would have been delivered around 1968 and would have also been Boeing's answer to the stretched Douglas DC-8 Series 60. Had the 707-620 been built, it would have cost around $8,000,000,000. However, engineers discovered that a longer fuselage and wing meant a painstaking redesign of the wing and landing gear structures. Rather than spend money on upgrading the 707, engineer Joe Sutter stated the company decided spending money on the 707 wasn't worth it. The project was cancelled in 1966 in favor of the newer Boeing 747. The 707-820 was a proposed intercontinental stretched variant of the 707-320B. This 412,000 pound MTO, 187,000 kilograms, variant was to be powered by 422,500 pound forced thrust, 100 kN, Pratt & Whitney JT3D15 turbofan engines, and it would have had a nearly 10-foot, 3.0 m, extension in wingspan, to 155.5 feet. 47.4 m. Two variations were proposed, the 707-820, 505 model and the 707-820, 506 model. The 505 model would have had a fuselage 45 feet, 14 m, longer than the 707-320B. For a total length of 198.6 feet, 60.5 m. This model would have carried 209 passengers in mixed-class configuration and 260 passengers in all-economy configuration. The 506 model would have had a fuselage 55 feet, 17 m, longer than the 707-320B. To 208.6 feet, 63.6 m, in length. This second model would have carried 225 passengers in mixed-class configuration and 279 passengers in all-economy configuration. Like the 707-620, the 707-820 was also set to compete with the stretched DC-8-60 Super Series models. The design was being pitched to American, TWA, Borg, and Pan Am at the time of its proposal in early 1965. The 707-820 would have cost $10,000,000,000. Like the 707-620, the 707-820 would have required a massive structural redesign to the wing and gear structures. The 707-820 was also cancelled in 1966 in favor of the 747. Military versions, edit. Main articles, C-137 Stratolina, E-3 Sentry, E-6 Mercury, E-8 Joint Stars, and Air Force One. The militaries of the US and other countries have used the civilian 707 aircraft in a variety of roles, and under different designations. The 707 and U.S. Air Force's KC-135 were developed in parallel from the Boeing 367-80 prototype. The Boeing E-3 Sentry is a U.S. military airborne warning and control system, AWACS, aircraft based on the Boeing 707 that provides all-weather surveillance, command, control, and communications. The Northrop Grumman E-8 Joint Stars is an aircraft modified from the Boeing 707-300 series commercial airliner. The E-8 carries specialized radar, communications, operations and control subsystems. The most prominent external feature is the 40 feet, 12 m, canoe-shaped radome under the forward fuselage that houses the 24 feet, 7.3 m, APY-7 active electronically scanned array side-looking airborne radar antenna. The VC-137 variant of the Stratolina was a special-purpose design meant to serve as Air Force One, the secure transport for the President of the United States. These models were in operational use from 1962 to 1990. The first presidential jet aircraft, a VC-137B designated SAM 970, is on display at the Museum of Flight in Seattle. Two VC-137C aircraft are on display with SAM 26,000 at the National Museum of the United States Air Force near Dayton, Ohio, and SAM 27,000 at the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library in Simi Valley, California. The Canadian Forces also operated the Boeing 707 with the designation CC-137 Husky, 707-347C, from 1971 to 1997. Boeing 717 was the company designation for the C-135 Stratolifter and KC-135 Stratotanker derivatives of the 367-80. The 717 designation was later reused in renaming the McDonnell Douglas MD-95 to Boeing 717 after the company merged with Boeing. Operators, edit. See also, list of Boeing 707 operators. Boeing's customer codes used to identify specific options and livery specified by customers was started with the 707, and has been maintained through all Boeing's models. In essence the same system as used on the earlier Boeing 377, the code consisted of 2 digits affixed to the model number to identify the specific aircraft version. For example, Pan Am was assigned code 21. Thus, a 707-320B sold to Pan Am had the model number 707-321B. The number remained constant as further aircraft were purchased. Thus, when Pan Am purchased the 747-100, it had the model number 747-121. In the 1980s, the USAF acquired around 250 used 707s to provide replacement turbofan engines for the KC-135E Stratotanker program. The 707 is no longer operated by major airlines. American actor John Travolta owned an ex-Qantas 707-138B, with the registration N707JT. In May 2017, he donated the plane to the Historical Aircraft Restoration Society near Wollongong, Australia. The The plane is planned to be flown to Shell Harbour Airport, where Haas is based, once repairs to ensure safe flying condition have been completed. The repairs were delayed several times since the 2017 announcement. Orders and deliveries, edit. Deliveries, edit. 707 delivery summary. Total 1994, 1993, 1992, 1991, 1990, 1989, 1988, 1987, 1986, 1985, 1984, 1983, 1982, 1981, 1980, 1979, 1978, 1977, 1976. 1010 105 14 4509 43888 236 1389 1975 1974 1973 1972 1971 1970 1969 1968 1967 1966 1965 1964 1963 1962 1961 1960 1959 1958 1957 1956 721 11 410 1959 111 118 83 61 38 34 68 80 91 77 800 707 Model Summary, edit. 707 Model Summary. Series Deliveries. 707 to 120 56. 707-120B72. 707 to 138 7. 707-138B6. 707 to 225. 707 to 369. 707-320B174. 707-320C337. 707 to 420 37. 707E3A57. 707E3D7. 707E3F4. 707E6A17. 707KE38. 707 total 856. 720-00065. 720-000B89. 720 total 154. 707 plus 720 total 1010. Accidents and incidents, edit. Main article, list of accidents and incidents involving the Boeing 707. As of January 2019, the 707 has been in 261 aviation occurrences and 174 hull loss accidents with a total of 3,039 fatalities. The deadliest incident involving the 707 was the Agadir air disaster, which took place on the 3rd of August, 1975, with 188 fatalities. On the 14th of January, 2019, a Sahar Airlines cargo flight crashed, killing 15 people and seriously injuring one more person. It was the last civil 707 in operation. Aircraft on display, edit. For military variants of the Boeing 707 on display, see Boeing C-137 Stratolina, Boeing E-3 Century, Boeing E-6 Mercury, and Northrop Grumman E-8 Joint Stars. 1 VHX-BA Model 707-138B, number 29, is one of the first 707s exported, and the first civilian jet registered in Australia. To Qantas in 1959, it is on display at the Qantas Founders Outback Museum in Longreach, Queensland, Australia. 24XBYD Model 707-131, F, number 34, an ex-Israeli Air Force and TWA aircraft, is on display at the Israeli Air Force Museum near Hatzerim, Israel. 30SJA Model 707-329, number 78, ex-Sabna, is the first jetliner registered in Belgium. Forward fuselage, salvaged following an uncontained engine failure and emergency landing, is on display at the Royal Military Museum, Brussels. 44XJYW Model 707-328, MSN.